the future of Chelsea Football Club has been plunged into uncertainty after owner Roman Abramovich's assets have been frozen.
Well, ministers accuse the Russian of having blood on his hands. Many of the papers do too this morning because of his links to Putin. And as a result, Chelsea Football Club isn't allowed to buy or sell players and is banned from ticket and merchandise sales.
We're joined now by former Chelsea player Pat Nevin, football pundit Alison Bender and sports lawyer Jamie Singer. Good morning to all of you. Thank you for joining us. Pat, it didn't seem to bother the players last night. I think first and foremost for Chelsea fans and Chelsea Football Club, they went on the field, they were playing Norwich, who were bottom of the league, and they got a result. I wonder how the players will be feeling knowing about the uncertainty around the club.
It doesn't make things easier for them, but footballers are generally very good at compartmentalising things anyway, because there's so many things going on in their life generally, but they have to put that to one side when they play football. If your mind's on something else when you're on a football field, it's not going to work well. So one of the things, the skills that you do learn, is the ability to do that. But that's easier said than done when there's massive things going on. And one of the things that affects them is if it's something that's going to affect their future very, very directly. I still think they'll be capable of carrying on quite well just now for a while. But if things like, and I don't want to be too cynical here, but if the wages don't come through 1 week, that'll make a difference. You know, and it does sound cynical, but that's what changes. They think, wow, this whole thing's stopping now. So for the moment, I think they'll be OK, but everything will change day by day by day. And for the players, they'll just have to deal with it. But, you know, I'll be honest with you, I'm more worried about other people that work at the club, you know, the other staff.
The shop's closed, so they're not going to work. The people in the...
There are hundreds, maybe sometimes thousands of people involved, and no one's talking about them. And these are people that, you know, their money means a huge amount to them, and maybe they're not going to get paid. So let's remember them as well as just the footballers and manager, etc.
Alison, you're a Chelsea fan, but you're also a football pundit, so you know this world inside out. Is it hard or easy to detach Chelsea and your love for Chelsea, but the reality of what the government have done here to Roman Abramovich and the suspicion of where sort of his connection with Putin and what's happening in Ukraine?
Yeah, it's a really difficult one. As you say, I kind of wear a few hats as a Chelsea fan, as a journalist and someone who's worked at the club. And as Pat said, I know loads of people, my phone's been going crazy with messages from people who have, you know, lost their jobs, freelancers, contractors, and it hits the poorest people as well. We're talking about security and catering staff, and we're going to be hearing about these in the coming days. But ultimately, you have to believe that it is the right thing to do if it can help towards peace. And that's something that I think has always been there for Chelsea fans. And I sort of was wondering the other night, could this be a watershed moment where fans actually start to really care about who owns them? I mean, some fans won't care. I was really disappointed, I have to say, to hear a small section of Chelsea fans singing Abramovich's name. Thomas Tuchel said, our manager, it's the wrong time to do this. And it is upsetting. But I do think that, yes, the players will be affected, but Tuchel is the right manager to take some of that off their shoulders at this really difficult time for everyone.
Jamie, it's very difficult, isn't it, for a club? And what we're talking about here, when you say, Alison, you know, that it's a watershed moment for people to think about who owns their club, you're then asking fans to be political, really, aren't you? And that's something that for centuries, really, we've had a debate over about whether sport and politics should be merged.
That's right. And we've always had this great feeling that sport and politics should be kept separate. But I think in the last few years, we're realising that's exceptionally difficult to do. And in sport, we have had many, many owners who have, on the face of it, been unlikely to pass, you know, the fit and proper person test for the Premier League. But very few people fail that test. And so we've seen the fact that all sorts of owners have been in the sport and all sorts of people bringing finance into the sport. And now, perhaps, people are looking at that a bit more closely and thinking, well, you know, on Sunday, we've got a derby between Newcastle, majority owned by a sovereign wealth fund from Saudi Arabia, and Abramovich, who's now been sanctioned. I mean, that's not a great look for the game. And it may be the sort of thing that helps push people forward on making decisions on this.
So are we looking at legal changes here, then? Are we looking at a situation where the criteria shouldn't just be based on the efficacy of them having the money to take a club forward, and the passion, presumably, should also be there, but something slightly different? Because that then presents who's going to fund clubs?
Well, that's a very good question. I think football fans are never the most objective in the world, and we're all guilty of that. So when it's our own club, people generally take a much more friendly approach to the money coming in and very keen to make sure that their club does as well as it can. When we're looking at rivals clubs, we're much more keen to see that that fit and proper person test is checked. So the rules at the moment are the Premier League rules, but as we've seen, it's very rare that they're imposed. But there's a select committee hearing on Tuesday when the Premier League and the FA are both going to be quizzed by the Parliamentary Select Committee. And I imagine one of the main things they'll be talking about is actually imposing tougher restrictions and the legal points you're talking about being a higher bar.
So what Pat mentioned was the players are pretty good at compartmentalising what's going on in their lives. They can get on the pitch and get on with doing the job until potentially they don't get paid. Are Chelsea in a position financially, with these restrictions in place, Jamie, to be able to keep up payments to members of staff and hopefully the broader members of staff, not just the players who obviously earn a lot? Because their wage bill, I think, per month is something like £28 million.
It is, it's huge. And so you're right. I think last year their wage costs were £330 million. And the freezing order does exactly what it says on the tin. It stops everything. So no money is meant to come in and no money is meant to come out. Now, the government have given them a licence to effectively run the club on a very, very basic level. So that means they're allowed to pay bills, such as payroll, but they're not allowed to use the money that comes in. So they're using cash reserves. So as you say, we don't know quite what the reserves are and how long this will last, but the pressure on the club to be able to continue with all these payments, you know, the match day costs, the paying of the salaries without using any incoming cash is going to be very difficult.
Chris Philp, Pat, has said this morning that if a bar emerges, because we know that Roman Abramovich has previously said that he wants to sell the club, if a bar emerges, they can approach the UK government. It feels like that's just going to add extra red tape and admin to whoever it is who may want to come in. Is Chelsea still a viable proposition to somebody out there who has the money to cover the cost?
There are some complexities to it. You're absolutely right. However, is it a saleable asset? Well, have a look at it. They're Club World Champions. They're European champions. They'll have a look at the youth department that they've built over the last period of time. Look where they're situated as well. You look at all this, you know, the soft power they've got in football all the way through the world. They have grown that club and it's got a fan base all the way around the world. And in situ, you've got a fantastic squad as well. So,
and
yes,
if someone
it is very
did
viable.
want to come in, would they get a bargain?
It depends. It's business, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's business. You know, it absolutely is. But, you know, if you come in and you're the only one there, you may well do. I think Chelsea fans, what they're looking to, they're thinking, right, what's the next one going to be like? Are they actually going to be, you know, as generous? Will they have the largesse that Roman Abramovich had? Well, that's unlikely. Because if you look around the world of football, who has actually been like that? Very, very few. But maybe when you get right down to it, and the Chelsea fans are listening, and they're all concerned about the future of the club, I find it almost unimaginable that this club will cease to exist in the longer term. Because why would you throw something like that out? And why would the government throw something as an asset like that out and not make some money out of it, especially as some could be going to good causes? That doesn't make a lot of sense, but it could look very different in the longer term.
Yeah. We're going to have to leave it there, but thank you all for joining us, Alison, Pat and Jamie. It's good to have you here this morning.